Hello, I hope you're not too tired because we're going to begin a very interesting panel, which is how social is enhancing communication, and social networks. And so I'm joined today by Alan NG and Ben Rubins. So maybe you can briefly introduce yourselves. Alan, you can. Or
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Hey guys, my name is Alan. I'm the founder of Everest Venture Group EVG, and then also the CEO of Open Social, which is the flagship product we're building under EVG. And a little bit of background. So EVG set up in late 2018. We're now one of the biggest operating group in Web3 in Asia. We have 300 people across different subsidiaries of ours, from media company to asset management to GameFi to SocialFi. And we are quite involved in the last cycle during the consumer adoption. You know, we were early contributors to projects like Sandbox, Animoca Brands, Stapple Labs, and etc. And I serve on those boards. And then we're incredibly excited about what SocialFi could possibly bring this cycle to the consumer adoption. Yeah.
Thank you, Ben. Yeah.
Hey, Ben Rubin. I've been building communication products for the past decade, maybe a little bit more. The product we're working on is essentially has two parts. The first part is a protocol called River for decentralized messaging. It lets essentially people, developers, or community create spaces that are completely programmable, and permissionless. And look at any on-chain footprint and decide the kind of rules of engagement. Because this is a mouthful to explain to people who are just trying to interact in a social way, we're building protocol towns, which is a client-facing part, I guess, for River, that allow people to create those spaces and interact. So it looks kind of like a Discord and Telegram had a baby. Yeah, and you can think about River as like if WhatsApp was a permissionless protocol that was owned and operated by the groups that are there. Yeah.
Great. I guess one question is because you have Town Square, which is customer-facing, client-facing, and you have the protocol side. What did you change in the past 2 years when noticing the interaction of customers? What has changed on the protocol side?
So funny enough, when we started, we wanted to extend an existing protocol that we thought would be fitting, and then we realized that the way they built the protocol would never allow it to be self-governed and permissionless. So we had to build our own protocol, which took another year. So River was just in May in testnet, and just to pass in June got into mainnet, and therefore Towns is just on mainnet. I think this is the 4th of the 5th week. What we have noticed is that the embedded wallet and abstracted account, like the fact that people do not need to connect their wallet, and you can just ask them to escalate that interaction later when they need to, it's been extremely beneficial for adoption. So people can just share a link and immediately get in, understand what's going on. And a good point for them to actually say, oh, I want people to know who I am, is where you actually say, like, okay, link your wallet and show somebody that you are that ENS name or have that NFT.
Great, and I guess that's a question for both of you. Your current users, they are crypto natives, or you're really onboarding new people? What do you notice when you analyze behaviors?
We also just started as well. So our first step that built on the Open Social protocol called Social Monster, SOMON, Somon, has just also got live. And obviously, you know, initially we're going to start targeting the Web3 users. I think it's a more natural pitch to. I think a lot of companies try to jump too fast, as in, you know, how do we solve mainstream adoption? How do we get billion users from day one? But that's not really a question you should think about in the first stage, right? Similarly to Web2, you're not going to really think about global expansion from day one. You're going to start with your hometown. And that's kind of like where we're focusing, at least I think for the next year or so. We think there's big enough audience base. But the key is to how do you create not a marginally better product, but something that's significantly better, and where people would use. And if you can even nail the Web3 users, you probably have no shot in nailing of the Web2 user as well. Yeah.
What about you, Ben? Do you have new users, or it's concentrated on like Web3 core users?
For good and bad, my philosophy is about building product is all about food. It's a lot of it analogous to food. And I think when you think about restaurants and great restaurants people go to, everything starts in street food, like something that everything all starts in like something that somebody can quickly grab and get it on a food stand. And I think that speaks to the users' interactions to first action to experience something. But if every food stand that is trying to serve, Middle Eastern food is going to make the Middle Eastern, Western, it's not going to make more adoption. But the fact that it was easy to access at first, somebody could just pass by and say like, "Ooh, that's interesting. I guess it doesn't cost me that much to just try it out and walk away with it." And I think to the point Alan is making, you don't want to change the essence or the taste, right? What you want to change is makes it very accessible. So I actually think that if you want to onboard a lot of people to Web3, you don't want to change the heart of what it is to be permissionless and programmable and what you can do with it. What you want to change is how easy it is for somebody to walk by and decide to try it out, And that's, I think, the right dynamic between the two. And we put a lot of emphasis on that, how to keep the heart but still make it very accessible. So even, my mother can follow a link and join a group.
And also just to add, I think social is one of those areas where the line between Web2 and Web3, more blurred out than other use cases like DeFi, right? Like you try to explain a bonding curve or how to wrap ETH, to any even TradFi guys is going to be difficult. But in reality, for social, obviously we are all Web3 guys. We love crypto. We believe in these ideals and all that. But at the same time, I love Kendrick Lamar. I like, I watch NBA and you watch Euro Cup. So we're incredibly social in a bunch of wide range of topics. And so the way I look at it is like, it's kind of blurred out. It's like, yes, I'm Web3 user, but that doesn't mean I'm disconnected from Web2 audience as well. So if my chat or my town or in our case, we call it tribe, if my tribe talks about Blackpink, right, then I can also invite my other Blackpink friends who also join the beef as well. So I think the line is kind of like blurred out. So I wouldn't really think about that as like, I still believe the Web3 cohort are the best evangelists and champions for you to kind of get to more mainstream. Yeah.
And funny enough, you mentioned some stars names. So I think when I think about SocialFi, I really think about also what happens with tokens previously. So it was basically football stars, big stars launching tokens, dumping on followers. So how is it? I think that's what's everyone is fearing that doesn't know SocialFi so well is how do you create products that have the right incentive where it's not, again, the same mechanism of like a star owning a big percentage of the supply of a token. So we're obviously specifically speaking about launching a token, and it's not the only thing about SocialFi, but how do you get the incentives right?
Yeah, I think ultimately, I think that's gonna be really difficult to happen anymore. It's probably not because of incentive mechanics. It's probably after FTX, you see Brady being burned and entire Hollywood was burned, by different projects. And honestly, like, I don't think the really good ones that has true fandom or IPs in general would really care about the airdrop or dumping because, like, you can't really incentivize Kylie Jenner to be on Warpcast. Like, Kylie's worth like a couple billion herself. Like, why would she want to do it, right? Like, she want to hang out and just has a good vibe. So I think ultimately thinking that, and that's why like you see maybe Acon trying to do it because that man needs some cash right now, and so ultimately I think it's less about the mechanic. It's just more about incentive and motivations, and I think that's also not the key. I think the key is how do you. There's nothing bad about the organization. It's like how do you put these financialization options in the hand of the people who never had them before. How do you make a potential, subreddit owner now can really create his own community and decide that if at some point become Wall Street bets, hey, instead of being all the value being captured by Reddit and I have nothing, I don't own the IP, I don't have any incentive, now I have certain financialization options, be it a meme coin, be it a NFT, be it anything they really choose to do. And if the communities happen on it and want to play the game of pump it down, they should enjoy it, right? There's nothing bad about it.
Okay, but that's maybe, and for the both of you again, how do you see your platforms? Do you see them at really enhancing communication and building stronger communities, or do you see them as fun places to interact and play, which is two, I think, different things, because the good thing about tokens is it can accelerate like communication, crazily onboarding, but it can also be destroyed really quickly if the value goes down. So how do you solve, like, do you think about these questions? How do you see your companies?
You want to go ahead? I think one of the things that we are missing is the accountability on the other side. One of the nice things about smart contract is that it's not like tokenization is one part. The other part is you can also enforce accountability, and you can also enforce trust, and you can also have a reputation that carries forever, on a certain actor. And the opportunity around graphs with high cluster coefficients like groups is the fact that you have multiple people, or multiple players, we can call them players, observing behavior of different actors, which means that you can, on one hand, reward and give part of the upside. On the other side, you can enforce mechanism of accountability. So things like it takes a certain stake to participate and benefit from the upside, but also you can lose it if you behave differently. And we have done what nature does, which is like, okay, and how do you incentivize and get people in? I think that in the next stage, in order to make things sustainable, you will have to bring it more closer to nature, which means that there has to be some sustenance and some replenishment that is happening by accountability and rewarding of the behavior. So you're not just incentivizing to come in. Incentivization of coming in means that by definition, somebody needs to accrue value from outside, bring it inside. Some of it needs to translate. Some need to be converted to other members. Some held accountability, and you have to bring it into some equilibrium. Otherwise, all we're going to have is just like bursts of flames that no coal and heat is left,
Okay. And how do you see it? Is it, pump.fun, both, no? Is it pump.fun or not? It's totally different what you're building.
It's different, but I respect pump.fun. I think it's a more fun product than a lot of socialify product out there. It's original, it's cool. And I see no issue with that. And just to add on to that question, I think, this is not, I think the whole, using token to incentivize people, but if the price crash, it could hurt it. I think the whole thing is not a unique Web3 problem. In Web2, we had that too. You think about every single Web2 company that raise money from all the venture capital shops, and where do they spend the money? If you open an account in SoFi, the advertising on the TV screen says, I'll give you an Apple share. Free Apple stock, right? Back in the day when Uber trying to get adoption, it's like, okay, 3 free trips, invite your friends. So incentive is commonly used for all sort of business model. But ultimately what decide on that, if anyone have operated any internet product before, is really based on whether your product is good. If your product is good, your community is good, your things are good, then a small proportion of the people will retain. And there's always going to be a proportion of user that's just coming in for that short-term incentive, and then they're going to leave. They're going to bounce. I'm going to download Lyft right now because there's another 3 free trips, and I see nothing wrong with that. either, because it's more a test of like whether your product actually, can glue certain people or retain certain people. So one of the best way I think about token, the analogy is actually from my grandpa. So I was trying to explain to my grandpa a couple of years ago during the Chinese New Year what I do. He's like, yeah, you're doing well. Tell me what you do. And I really struggled. And then after hearing everything I said for about 30 minutes, he summarized it in 3 minutes, and it's like freaking brilliant. He's like, oh, it's basically like church. He's like, back in the days when he moved to Hong Kong from China, he worked in the pier as a coolie, carrying the bags and stuff. And he's a man who believed in like Buddhism, Taoism, and stuff like that, right? Very old school guy. And yet he would go to church every Sunday. Because in church, they would give out free congis and free food. And so all of them would ask their friends, like, you know what, let's go get free congee, let's go get free food. And the funny thing is when they get to the church, wow, it's beautiful. People are singing now, holding their hands, you get to meet your girlfriend, you play badminton together, they teach you English. So 1 out of every 5 person get converted. And those people donate 10% to become more congees. So the key is not about the congees. The key is about, do you have a beautiful church? Do you teach them English? Do you play badminton? Do they find their next girlfriend? If you have a great product, people is going to convert, and those people become the core. And there are people who will always leave, and I think it's okay, right?
And still in client-facing apps, do you think that there are things that shouldn't be monetized, like interactions? What do you monetize and what don't you monetize? Like, do you put limits on some things, or really you just let people experimenting?
Yeah, I think monetization is good as well. The way I kind of look at it is ultimately, if you don't have any potential monetization, and when I say monetization, I mean recurring monetization. So I don't mean like token or capital gains, right? If you don't have any recurring monetization mechanics in any social product, like how do you share the plate? Right. Ultimately, we don't blame Facebook for the fact that they have ads, because nothing could be free. Server, costs money. Everything costs money. You blame Reddit because there's a lot of Robinhood ads on Wall Street Bet, but the owner of Wall Street Bets and the moderators gets nothing. That's what we're really accusing. We're not really accusing, like, if you imagine they're sharing 80% of those Robinhood ads advertising income with the moderators, and actually people are going to be pretty happy. It's like, we deserve our work scaling this thing from 100 people to now 1 million people. So I think the key is about how do you actually create a mechanic. So you actually want that. You want maybe a more less black box version of like a Google AdSense on top. You want a more open version of like, hey, how can a more precisely airdrop and making sure the community builders, community operators, and the end user gets something. So I think monetization is incredibly important, right? We're not in a charity business, and
No. And Ben, in Town Square, like, do you monetize?
It's just towns, Towns, just towns.
Okay. In towns,
But it's come from Town Square.
Okay. Are there things you don't monetize, or what do you monetize in the client-facing app?
Right now, we the way it works is that space creators, meaning space on river, which on towns we brand it as towns, but you can call it whatever you want in your own client. In the space creators can choose how they want participant to pay for being part of the space. So every space has, when you create a new space on towns, essentially a river will deploy a smart contract on base that represent all the admin dynamics that you would expect from, say, a Telegram group or in a Discord server on-chain as a smart contract on base, meaning the memberships, channels, roles, rules of moderation, who can read, who can write, what are the rules, and you can get pretty expressive if you know Solidity. You can customize it pretty unique to your use case. The Towns interface allowed the space creators to actually choose the 3 different models: dynamic pricing, fixed pricing, and some free tiers that we let. And essentially what happens is that every town has its treasury that as the town founder you control. But on chain, you can see that all the subscription or membership payments go into the town treasury, which you control as the space owner. 90% goes to you, and then 10% go to the river protocol by definition. And that 90-10 rev share is by the river DAO can choose to increase it or lower it. But right now it's set to that, and that's how the river protocol that provide the backend, the servers, right, and that's how they kind of pay for the inflation to operate the nodes, and then. To Alan's point, there are people who create these really valuable communities but don't enjoy the accrual of the value in any transparent or native way. They either have to do things behind the scenes or do some hacky ways that bunch of other people, get caught on along the way, and it just feels hacky. Or it can be on chain, and you can see, okay, I sold $100,000 worth of memberships, and 10 grand went to the servers and the back end, and 90 grand stayed here, and the community can watch it. We had a town last week where we kind of just like tweeted something out, and we thought, okay, maybe like 100 people will come. It was 1,000 people at town, and it filled up pretty quickly, and that town has like 7 grand in it now, where people paid for it. And I think that's just for the 1 hour that this tweet was live, and for somebody who's spending time on the internet, any one of us, and have some sort of point of view or taste about the kind of curation they want to do for their online community, a way for them to put a link out there, immediately get bootstrapped with some sort of startup money for their community, have this thing built on chain, being able to have the trust of the community to see that, to understand where the money goes, to engage on it and converse on it. I think it's a pretty powerful start. And all of this happens, with embedded wallets, and people don't need to connect there, which is kind of cool. So it's a good, it's a good beginnings.
There is currently a hot topic, which is AI x Web3 intersection. So I don't know if you think about it a lot, if you see social fi being an answer to the problems of social media, and having social incentives, like economic incentives to, prevent deepfakes, or like, do you see, or performing transactions on chain? So if you didn't think about it too much, you can just touch on it. But do you see social fi being an answer to the problems of like Web2 platforms with the rise of generative AI and AI?
I don't think so. Yeah. Well, Web2 platform really powerful. I mean, yeah, Facebook's $100 billion cash. How are we gonna fight that? I don't know. It's like the way I look at it is like I think we're interested in social fi not because we think that all Web2 is evil, or I love my Twitter. I enjoy people who love Kendrick beefing with calling.
You love
Drake,
Kendrick, huh?
Yeah, I love Kendrick. I'm a true Kendrick fan, not a Drake fan though. So it's like, I think though it's like, you love those beef, and those people never get on Web3, whatever, next five years. It's okay, and I enjoy my TikTok, I like my YouTube, right? It's okay, right? And so I don't think necessarily see them as evil. I think the whole AI problem you brought up is another very high level problem that is actually much harder to solve, and I think it would take many folds. It will be technology, it will be regulations, it will be many layer of things, and I don't think some socialify startup can solve that. Yeah, unfortunately. That's probably going to be the most important challenge our planet going to face next 100 years. Yeah.
Then same, you don't think...
I share the similar bottom line as Alan. I generally think that every derivative asset is creating more value to the core, the original asset. So when you think about the movement around Web2, replication of image, replication of identity, then you think about AI and like the magnitude of this. I think all of what it does, it creates derivative asset to the main asset, which is you and a loved one holding hands and drinking coffee and looking into each other's eyes. Like that's going to go higher because all the replications of it is essentially just pushing the idea and the image of it, but it's not. It's never the same as the core thing. And I think as that happened, we're going to feel lonelier and lonelier on the internet, which will increase the value of in real life. And I think the one thing that could be helpful is if we knew that we're actually talking to, even though there is a digital wall between us, that I know I'm actually talking to Alan, that I know, even though maybe I don't know Alan, I actually know Alan went to the same shows that I went to, or is part of the same ethos that I have. And I think one of the nice things about blockchain as technology, not as a front end thing, but as technology, is that if you believe in science, you believe, you know, that the user in front of you probably have done these actions in order to be able to communicate. And I think it's a form of internet intimacy that we didn't have before and we couldn't prove before. I think we have the same conclusion, maybe through the different equations.
And one question I'm genuinely asking myself, I mean, on the regulation side, it's been tricky. Where are your companies based? How do you see regulation? Do you see it as a real potential threat to your company for maybe people who want to start SocialFi companies?
Not really. I think that's why we're in Web3, right? We hate regulation, so. Yeah, like, you know, well, obviously I'm Chinese. I saw maybe 1 or 2 Asian here. Like, if you look at most Asian countries, they're autocratic country, and we self-censor. You know, I don't talk about crypto in WeChat. Doesn't mean I don't like WeChat. I like WeChat for a lot of aspects of the functionality, but you know, I think self-censorship is everywhere. So. And I think the good thing about having a dApp, that's why we believe in, like, you know, SocialFi could possibly bring, you know, tens of thousands of community dApps by the end of this cycle in the next couple of years, because we think that's an important aspect that people's going to value, right? And if you think about how Telegram, which is the hottest topic right now, everyone's talking about, or the only token that hasn't tanked that much in the last probably 2 months, is pretty much started in the same way, right? And I think there's a very critical part of it. So if you launch a community dApp, probably not so much. But obviously, I think every social company, as they grow big, they're going to get watched by the government, for sure. You know, but I think that's the whole reason why you should launch a dApp, community dApp, or SocialFi dApp, instead of trying to launch it on TikTok, because the phase of TikTok is already been concluded. Yeah.
Makes sense. Ben, regulation, like, do you just don't think about it, or sometimes do you fear it?
I don't fear it. As I said earlier, I think that accountability is important. I think that clear, thoughtful, and intentional regulation can provide good background for people to test their hypotheses and understand what it is that they want to argue for, and what it is that they actually. It can provide like an actually really interesting way to think about, like, oh, I'm thinking as a builder about the optimist case, but clearly the regulator had a different point of view about how somebody can, you know, get harm from this. So let me just think twice about how I'm going to prevent that. While it is annoying, where sometimes the regulator can be politically motivated and not really thinking about their job of protecting their constituents, I think that generally, and I know it because, you know, the River Association has been set up in Switzerland, and we've went through the whole process of what it means to, you know, create a platform that will be eventually owned and operated by the users, and how you do that legally. And throughout that process, which was, you know, long and cumbersome, you actually appreciate that there's some clarity and guidance of how to do things in a way that serve the goal that you're trying to do. I think some states, specifically Wyoming in the states, are going towards that direction. While on the federal level, we don't really have that much clarity, and that's not a secret. So, yeah.
I think actually it's a very powerful, like, cause for SocialFi. Is like, if you watch the movie Dumb Money, right? And you saw that scene when the SFC and start contacting Reddit, and Reddit had to shut that down, right? You know, kind of trying to moderate it. That's exactly why it's fucked up, right? That's exactly why I think you should have community dApps in terms of just, you know, trusting Reddit, because yeah, Reddit's gonna bow. They need to IPO. They're not going to piss off SFC. But obviously, if you think other way around, it's like, yeah, what if people use the community to talk about something about terrorism or money laundering? And I think that's the whole point. Is like it really have to go down to the community censorship, right? So let the community vote by their presence. So if you feel like this moderation policy of the owner of like a town or a tribe or a space, whatever you want to call it, is violating your present belief, just vote, just leave, right? Start your own. I think that's the whole beauty about this is that people get to opt for what they are getting comfortable or not getting comfortable about. If everyone leave, then you'll be meaningless or not valuable. So you're kind of giving their check and balance into, really putting that question not in the regulator's mind, but, in the owner of the space mind and say, how far I'm willing to go, right?
And I guess last question. So you're both building, you're building open social protocol and river protocol. Is there any interoperability yet? Is the space going to be fragmented again? If it grows in a huge manner, there is going to be a ton of protocols, a ton of standards, or do you see collaboration? Which other tools are you working with? How do you see that evolving?
I mean, we definitely design the protocol and all the on-chain footprint that comes out of it, like the spaces, so people can integrate and use it. And I haven't looked at all the stuff of open protocol, but my hope is that there are things that users of open protocol can use and bring to the town's clients or vice versa. And my hope is that River Protocol can read, will be able to read from, I think that's when my first product that got like some sort of a breakthrough engagement was something called Meerkat, which was live streaming on Twitter. And one of the biggest painful experiences was where it became so big and Twitter pulled the API and blocked it. And for me, that's something that as a builder that, just try to create those experiences, something that, is one of the guiding force in the things that I build is like how to build open networks. Because to Alan's point, is like, it's about the experience and the community that people are bringing. And if everybody's doing well, then everybody's doing well. So, yeah.
I think obviously everyone is trying to be open, but it's also hard to ask Lens to collaborate with Farcaster. I think. I think at this point, the space is so early. We're gonna see many different novel experiment, and the way I kind of look at it is they're all trying to maybe solve different problems with different solutions, right, within the space. So ultimately, they might not be even trying to solve the same problem. Like, for example, like I got asked this question a lot, right, by communities, or by investors, by partners, like, how are you guys different from Farcaster, or how are you going to compete? But I think the question is not about compete. The question is like the problem you're trying to solve could be fundamentally different, right? We're not trying to build a Twitter. We don't think anyone could successfully build a Twitter, right? Last time there's a company who has $100 billion cash and 3 billion users and tried pretty hard and they failed, right? So I don't think 150 million is going to get you anywhere. And that's my philosophy, but I think the experiment is novel. And what we kind of focus on is like, how do we help be a multi-chain protocol? And we're not trying to be a chain ourselves as well. We're deploying ourselves against every single chain you have out there, EVM, SVM. So you can choose what kind of format of the community you want to launch. Is it forum? Is it feed? Is it a space? Is it a Substack? Choose the template. Choose which chain you want to be on. Choose whether you want to subsidize gas fee. Choose what kind of plugin you want to use. Let's say you're a sport tribe. You can choose to use binary options. That may be your monetization model. So choose whatever and launch your own and just experiment with it. And ultimately, I think it's going to work with many different other technology modules as well, because you can't reinvent all the wheels. Nobody can. And so I think, also I think we should socialify as well. I think they're all trying to probably solve different problems too, and there's a value for multiple player to all coexist. And I think also most people is underestimating how I think big potentially the TAM of SocialFi could be, like in this cycle. Just like I think people making the same mistake people made in the beginning of the last cycle about GameFi as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Alan. Thank you, Ben. It was a good conversation. I hope you appreciate it. Is there any question, I guess, from the audience? Yeah, go ahead.
Since this morning we are talking about the fact it's very hard to get users, and SocialFi you are all like fighting for qualified users, you know. And my question is like you are talking about WeChat, but do you think that we have super app in Web2? Do you think you will gonna have super app in Web3, like in a way of like having an app where I can connect all my SocialFi accounts and be connected with everyone? Something
All your Web2 accounts?
No, my Web3 I can like Farcaster, Lens, open social accounts, and this way I can connect on everything. Do you think like a super app like WeChat will happen in Web3 or you are all
It's hard because I think the whole concept of super app like WeChat is box everyone out. It's like they have to screw everyone out so that they're a super app. so I think that's probably by definition of a super app is monopoly, right? And so, and obviously we're seeing, for example, like in Telegram, there's mini app and there's a lot more. But I think what they're really smart about it is like they kind of segregate into two layers. There's Telegram mini app strategy and there's Ton, right? So you don't have to necessarily do both. You can just do the mini app and direct the traffic to some other chains, right? If you look at some of the top DApps on top, almost none of them is developing on top of Ton. They're all Telegram mini app that's drawing the traffic somewhere else. So I do see probably a lot of rooms for different players to kind of cross the traffics or as you said, like aggregate certain traffics into different ways. And I think that's the very important part for any developer to think about. Actually in SocialFi, I think interoperability is not the key questions, because trying to make everything interoperable by a user is almost like, just like look at European Union, right? They're trying to make every single country here interoperable. And how successful is that, right? Not so successful. And the way I kind of look at it is like, what you should really focus on is composability. Because composability is where that all the platform has certain different advantage, and how to use these tools and traffics, each one have different purpose. How to take each of the component modules or traffics or subcultures they have and compose your own. I think that is the biggest advantage that people should be seeing, is that how do we leverage Web2 and how do we leverage all the infrastructure out there to create something new. And I think that is going to be like super, super key, right?
Now leaving the floor to the next panel, and I guess one last word is, I didn't say it at the beginning, but I'm the organizer of NFT Paris. So it's a big conference that's happening in February. And so there is going to be NFT Paris, XYZ Paris, which is about AI, RWA Paris, Ordinals Paris, so really every topic like Depin Track, all you want, like all the hot topics are going to be at the conference, and we're awaiting 20,000 attendees next year. So yeah, just wanted to hope to see you there. Thank you.